Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Final review, spring. First slide here, I want you to notice. You can use this for the final exam. In bold on the exam, you'll be allowed to use a periodic table, a calculator, and a help sheet with equations and example problems only. As I go through this presentation, I will give you ideas of the types of example problems and the types of equations that you should think about including on your sheet. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you're wondering, that is the final countdown in the background. Unit 6, semester 2 started with Unit 6. Here's some vocab terms you can see there. Things that I would include on my help sheet if I were getting ready for this final, I would include all of the types of mole conversions. Things like moles to grams and grams to moles using molar mass. Things like moles to particles and particles to moles using Avogadro's number. I would also make sure I know how to calculate things like percent composition, empirical formula, and molecular formula. All of those things are calculations that you need to make. Go back and look at the Unit 6 exam and any quizzes in Unit 6 to help you get an idea for the types of multiple choice questions that might be asked on the final exam for Unit 6. Unit 7 continued with a lot of calculations. This was my favorite, stoichiometry. So here's some vocab terms for you there. Make sure you know what those are. Calculation, things that you need to write down. You should be able to do those 3-step mass-to-mass problems and use those to be able to determine limiting reactant, excess reactant, theoretical yield. All of those are things you would do using those 3-step problems. You need to make sure you understand the difference between theoretical yield and actual yield. One of those being a calculated amount, the other one being an amount that is recovered in a lab, and then how those two work together to determine an accuracy of a lab in percent yield. So again, make sure that you can use all of these things in calculations, the mass-to-mass 3-step problems. Really give yourself good examples for these so that you have that template that you can follow when the time comes. That was kind of tough for some folks. Unit 8, all about heat and temperature. So make sure you have the equation for heat and temperature, which would be Q equals C times M times delta T. Make sure you know what all the variables mean. You can write down the conversions for joules to calories, calories to joules. You can write down the conversion for Celsius to Kelvin. You can have all of that stuff written down in there. Make sure that you give an example of some heat calculations involving thermochemistry. So if I know how many grams of something I have, and I know from the equation the amount of heat that is produced per mole, I can convert to moles and then go ahead and determine kilojoules. So there's a lot of stuff going on with Unit 8. Go back and make sure that you understand all the various terms and then use those in order to be able to do some of the calculations. Unit 9, again, a ton of calculations with Unit 9. Make sure that you have written down things like the combined gas law, the ideal gas law, and Dalton's law of partial pressures. Make sure you include example problems of how each one of those might be used. Make sure in Unit 9 there was a lot of this stuff where we talked about direct and inverse relationships, both with numbers numerically and also in theory and conceptually in Unit 9 as we went through and talked about that. Unit 10, there we go. Unit 10 was all about the solids, liquids, and gases, kinetic theory stuff. So not a whole lot of calculations with this one. It's going to be more theory, and holy moly, that looks like a lot of vocabulary terms there. So you may want to go back through and make sure you know what all of these look like and how that might show up in a test, right? And so just remember, you will have a word bank because they'll all be multiple choice. So if I do any kind of vocabulary type stuff, it'll either be multiple choice or I may throw some matching in there. So you'll have the word bank built in. Last was Unit 9. So Unit 9, we looked at things like solution, solute, concentration, concentrate, all of these different terms here. Make sure you understand the difference between those. Be able to calculate molarity. Right? Big M equals moles over liters. That's an equation you could write down and an example problem that you could include. Right? And then be able to make sure that you can do some dilution stuff. Right? And if a little final countdown wasn't enough to get you pumped up, how about some Eye of the Tiger in the background? If you haven't seen Rocky III, it's a great movie. So dilution calculations, that's the stuff that we just kind of went over. And then also with Unit 11, we added in some acids and bases. And so with acids and bases, here's some terms, right? Compare and contrast them by properties. And then also this whole pH, H3O plus, OH minus stuff, understanding how something can be considered acidic or basic just based on these numbers. So go back through, look at all of the various things that you have, all the old tests and quizzes. You have tons of examples of things to look at, lots of different graded practices, any matching and multiple choice type question that you could possibly look at. You're not going to have to really type anything other than maybe a letter if it's matching. So no short answer or anything like that. It's all going to be in Schoology and all be graded by Schoology. So make sure that you go back and look at all the different types of questions that we had so far this semester. The only way you're going to have anything from first semester is if it kind of matched up and had to follow through a little bit. But otherwise, it's going to be all second semester. So I wish you the best of luck. It's been a pleasure, and you're all going to do great.